We are back with the Zahir by Jorge Luis Borges, one of our favorite writers, discussing the story today.
Zahir.
I'll say this. So maybe we do this approach. I've gotten my notes this way, if you're okay with it, just kind of stepping through it. Because with Borges, I can't just be like, here's the point of the story. Like you to me, I got to chunk it out, and I've got 4 or 5 different angles to kind of talk about. So maybe this way we just touch on all of them as we move through this, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, it's something that I think is unique to all of his stories of just going through it. The same rigmarole doesn't do it justice because they are so flavorful.
All right, so let's loop back and forth between these themes. Opening just jumps right into it, right? It hits you with the Zahir is this 20 centavo coin from Argentina, right? And presumably, I don't know a lot about Jewish mysticism and Gnosticism and stuff like that. But I presume there's a lot of references here. You're going to have to do your own research there. But ultimately, we're revealing that this 20 centavo coin, the Zahir, falls into the character of Borges' hand. So the main character that we follow through this, his name is Borges. You can presume it is of and most likely the author Borges, but it's still a fictional character. It's a fictional creation. And that's what I love is not that he hasn't done this trick before, like this mixing of reality and fantasy, but particularly this story where an obsession can force you to blur those lines between reality and fantasy. I like the way that he kind of does that in this story. It gives that move a little extra ganache when he pulls it off.
And he always pulls it off. And I think for me, this story, it really starts to make me believe, is Borges really writing nonfiction? It just, so many of his stories are so intricate. They're so well written. They feel so real. I know you say it blurs the line between fiction and nonfiction. I think he saw something in the world unique. I think that he saw the world in a unique way. And I think that his writing really gives us beyond just imagination to give us these truths that sometimes we're not willing to see. I don't know. This story, I'm thinking back to all the other ones, and this story references a lot of other stories within his own universe and other novels and stories. It feels like a precipice of he was onto something, and I wish that I could go into his mind more.
Or maybe not. It could be terrifying because of the way that he'd be haunted by some of those dreams and stuff like that, like in terms of the dreams of infinity and the infinite rooms and such. It definitely gave him this unique ability to look at a single event, let's say like this, we'll call this event X. And it's not as simple as 3 people saw event X and reported something different. Like I call that the Rashomon effect, right? Where we each saw it differently. It's the fact that we all saw the same thing, agree it's the same thing, but like our reality shaped by language too, we each call it something different. Like even in the story, there's a different spelling of Zahir and stuff like that. How do you encompass all the knowledge? Even though our knowledge is the same, we have different ways of expressing it too. Like there's something unique about that, the way that Borges even explores that with the other, I'm going to say main character, like this woman, this Teodolina, or was that what her name was? Teodolina? Yeah, Teodolina Villar. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. Sorry. She's this fashion model, and it talks about how, well, she was mostly beautiful, right? Well, depending on the picture, right? Like we might have different views, different points of time in terms of how beauty is captured, which we've talked about before with some of his other stories. But again, it's like this, I don't know if this is pushing too far, but beauty is something that's always, and the face value of things is something that's always captured, I think, humanity's interest, right? If you look at the news and these articles that come out that are, they're very short, they're ephemeral, but they capture a moment of obsession. And it's interesting the way that her point of the story to me was beauty being this point of obsession, a temporary thing, and then it's quickly passed off onto this coin, the Zahir, which becomes the character of Borges' new obsession. It's like we can turn in old obsessions for new obsessions, but We're always obsessed and fixated on things typically.
It feels like the expectations of one's point of view really dictates this. And that transference really feels to be the crux of this story as transferred. What does that mean to us? Is it something as simple as looks? Is it simple as something as obsession? Or is there something deeper there, the meaning that Borges is trying to push us towards?
Well, I'm sure it's deeper than I could articulate, right? Like we both have such a high level of reverence for Borges, but I mean, when we think about it, if we take that, everybody's looking at person X, A, B, and C characters, and all we've changed is the words, right? Well, now we have to go down the Theseus ship problem. Theseus had the ship, all made of wood. Some of the wood boards went rotten, right? So we replace just those rotten boards. Is it still his ship? Yes. And then what happens if you replace some more boards? Is it still his ship? Yeah. And then what happens if you keep replacing the boards over and over again? When is it no longer the ship, even though it's making the same model, it's used by and owned by the same person, registered legally as the same ship, even though all the wood or maybe all the nails are completely replaced? It can be a completely new material object called the same thing, and we still identify with that, right? And I think we've talked about that many times with people as we change. We marry someone on a particular day. As we grow and evolve, we may grow apart from others, and we may need to evolve with that person because we, even as people, even though I'm always referred to as Una, you always Crypto, become something else throughout time. We constantly shift, this Theseus ship problem.
So bringing it back, we get to Zahir, the coin that becomes the obsession, and it's rattled off several different iterations of throughout history. Judas's 30 silver pieces, Belaris's alms, Sharon's the coins. It seems to be a theme here throughout over and over in the story.
Yeah, there's that quote, money is abstract. I said over and over, money is future time.
That's deep.
But I mean, does it even have to be money? Though money is typically an obsession for humanity, is it not, like if we take the Zahir to instead be a metaphor of what is capturing our current obsession, like what is our current obsession, what is capturing our current attention, if you will, like it can shift from being beauty to this capturing of money or getting rid of the money to being obsessed with trying to forget the money, right? Like how our main character goes and sells off the coin or whatever, uses the coin, gets rid of it. And then he can't stop thinking about it. Like he's still obsessed with it. And it talks about how throughout time, it could have been tigers. It could have been a crack in a marble. Like we've always had these obsessions. And when we focus on these obsessions, it almost makes us lose touch with reality. Like this blurring of, are we dreaming? Is it reality? Like, are we losing touch with things? Like it's kind of interesting that it doesn't have to be coins. It could be anything throughout time that we will get distracted by.
I want to go a lot of different places here. Follow with me. First of all, I feel like this is one of the original FOMO stories of, that people have this fear of missing out, and that he has this fear that he is not going to be where he needs to be. I also kind of related this back to your idea that we become obsessed with things. So if you didn't know, Una and I met playing a Star Wars mobile game. And it's kind of like that, where you become obsessed with collecting these things. And we all kind of have that a little bit innate in us. And I don't know if it is a hoarder mentality or if it's something that is in our lizard brain as humans. But a lot of us find something that we become obsessed about. Books, video games, whatever it may be. And we put all of our time and money into that. To bring it back to the game that Una and I played for a long time, is that if you spent money in the game, you could save time. Now that's what I kind of think about, of like, if you have this money, it can save you the hard work, so to speak, and it gives you more free time. And that's something that we're all looking for, because that's our most valuable commodity.
Because you can never get it back, right? Every second is gone.
And you can't get more. Life is finite.
Yeah. So kind of interesting. our character, Borges, decides that he's going to write this fictional tale, and that's going to help him forget about the Zahir. I have a fun fact here, okay? He writes about this character that he's supposed to be free of sin, but no one is, right? He slits his father's neck for money. Turns out to be, the whole treasure greed thing kind of comes up. It made me think of basically every Shakespeare plot that ever happened.
But, this is very stereotypical.
But the character's name, the Fanfir, again, our pronunciations are awful. We admit that. But I guess, did you know that character was an inspiration for Smaug and Gollum from Lord of the Rings?
Oh, I did not know that. Okay. Yeah, that fits very well.
Well, and what is Gollum's identity? But he is so obsessed with this ring, it becomes his identity, like this external, rather than internal and the relationships we build, which is typically revered as the best way to live, the way that most people regret that they didn't do during life. But like his identity becomes literally what we warn people about, as being so external, so focused on power and material wealth that isn't going to go with you in the afterlife, and nobody's going to care about you in the afterlife. And then when you also kind of compare that to Smaug, right, who mounds this treasure of gold, these are two characters that their obsession, their singular obsession, made them lose track and connection with the entire world. That they became these outcasts, or these hermits that were completely separated from connections, if you will. And I think that's interesting, coming from a story that's about this obsession that makes you lose control, makes you lose connection with others on some levels.
It comes down to attachments, right? If you're attached to things, there is only so far that can take you. If you're attached to people, those people could remember you when you're gone. It almost immortalizes you, where if I have a ring or a necklace or something that I give to my niece, or I give away to somebody, that thing doesn't remember who I am, but my niece, or if I had a daughter or granddaughter or something like that, they would. I think that it's that building of relationships.
So it's interesting that, okay, so here's another theme for Borges, is his infinity problem. And he's going to buy this book that is going to represent all the knowledge on the Zahir, but then he finds this other Tennyson writer that knows more knowledge, right? And it kind of goes back to that Library of Babel thing that we talked about, where you could write every letter, every combination of every word in possible existence, and you will have technically written everything known to mankind, along with a bunch of gibberish, right? And the story ends with this line, perhaps behind the coin I shall find God. And that's an interesting proposition, because if God is immortal, he's timeless, he's infinite. And, a lot of religions, and I say God, not all religions are the exact same. It's a very broad statement, but you're supposed to have a relationship with God. You're supposed to pray to this God. I don't know all the religions and all the nuances. So, obviously there's some that don't fit this mold, but how do you have a relationship, understanding and relationship that's timeless, infinite, and immortal? Like, you will never have that connection to the point where you could waste and lose your entire mind trying to chase this problem of infinity. Because if God is everything, everywhere, everybody at once, you can't have that relationship with everyone as a human. There's not enough time in this world. It can be mind-boggling in how you can get lost in that chase almost.
For sure. When it comes down to it, the Zahir is not about the Zahir. It's about your relationships, your relationship with whatever you worship, your relationship with your family and friends, and that your obsession can take you away from those, which, from my point of view, and reading this story and getting to know Borges over the last couple of years, is a negative thing. There are certain things that should feel more important, and if something doesn't, then maybe it's time to reevaluate.
It's kind of like the epiphany here causes you to become lost in oblivion, right? And we are by far not the first people to point this out, but this is the opposite of the Aleph, where the epiphany causes you to understand and realize everything, to become the infinite. Here, the infinite consumes you. to the point of madness, right? Almost like the Funes problem. If you could remember everything, how mind-boggling and frustrating and eternal pain you would have.
Oof. Yeah.
It's the negative of the epiphany of realizing and encountering infinity. It could crush you, or it can elevate you to everything, right? Like that's one of those, like, I don't know what the right science term is, where like you're dancing that fine line where you're either, elevated to perfection or crushed to nothing. Like that's just a fascinating way that Borges has positioned, our relationship to the problem of infinity.
Is it 1 or is it 0?
Can't be in between.
It can't be in between.
And I'm not really a quantum physics guy, but I do know, and I don't know when we discover this. This is completely anachronistic, I think. But it's like that point of like, it could be A, it could be B, and it could be in between. But as soon as you measure it, it gets forced to A or B, right? Which is why if you measure things too often in quantum mechanics, it always like resets it. It's one of those like Schrodinger cat's problem type of things that I think is really, I don't know. It's way above my head, but it's really fascinating to kind of like play with and think about.
I mean, if you zoomed out far enough, and obviously it would be, quote, impossible, but if you zoomed out far enough and viewed the entire universe at once, it would be a singular dot.
Well, and I still always go back to your example. So it's like, I think most people's minds can't fathom that. What's even more interesting is how you ought to be able to fathom this, that you can't, but you said at one point, in some point in the universe, someone will have started their dryer with clothes in it, and it'll have spun around, and when they open it, just by the sheer mechanics of randomness, everything should be perfectly folded and ready to go, and just take it out of the dryer. You don't have to do anything. Like that should theoretically in the chaos, it should be but everybody's like, that's not possible. But like it technically is. Like it's unlikely, but it's possible.
I'll take a picture when it happens to me one day. The Zahir dryer.
All right, that was the Zahir. Let us know what other Borges story to check out next. We're going through all of the labyrinths, so we'll get through all of those eventually. But if there's one you think is a higher priority or other story, let us know in the comments down below. My name has been Una. Thank you for spending time with us in our ever-growing love of Borges and the literature he left us. Peace.
Peace.